Can universities cope with the latest now? Are universities going to be relevant in the future? In a time of dramatic change, when there is a grand competition of powers and ideas, widespread disruption with technologies challenging the human role in future workplace, with social media transforming the way people interact, and existing systems and role models under scrutiny. Presidents from 4 of the world's best universities weigh in with straightforward answers, frank discussion. World Insight Special: The Future of Universities. A mind enlightened will never become dark again. That's what they say about education, which is always the key. But what kinds of education? It depends on who you ask and what time. The answer could vary tremendously, but that in itself is a wonderful thing, an open question with inclusive answers. That's why I'm coming to Peking University, a campus well known for openness, innovation, and inclusiveness. Even this lake, after a long debate, it is officially called Weiming Lake, meaning no definite name, a lake with all possibilities. Peking University this year is celebrating 120th anniversary, and that's why we are also here. A 100 years ago, Peking University already became the largest institution of higher learning here in China, thanks to this man, Tian Wei, who is the president of Peking University then. Encouraged by academic freedom, he employed an intellectually diverse group, left, right, conservative, liberal, all in this campus. One could almost imagine the enormous amount of debate that is going on right here. Particularly here, this historic courtyard, the former residence of the school's president. This evening, another debate is going to take place right here, when presidents of some of the most respected universities from around the world will gather and brainstorm about the future of universities. I will see you then. Hello and welcome to our special program, World Insight with Tian Wei on CGTN. We are focusing our topic, the future of universities. It is a gigantic one, I know. However, we have a very strong panel today to help us analyze all of the important issues related to that topic. I'm so honored to be joined by presidents from 4 world-renowned universities. And now, let's meet them. Professor Lin Jianhua, the president of Peking University from China. Professor Stephen Tu, vice-chancellor of the University of Cambridge. Professor Louise Richardson, vice-chancellor of the University of Oxford. Welcome, Professor. Last but not least, Professor Peter Sullivan, president of Yale University. Welcome. Good to see you, sir. What a pleasure to have all of you here in Peking University. First of all, I have to say my great appreciation for President Lin for lending to us this beautiful courtyard. You probably have to tell us about this, why we are here.
Okay, so this is actually a very special place. It used to be the Yanjing University President House, and very recently it used to receive the guests, in particular the international guests like you.
And there we go. So my first question, may I have all of you to pick up the writing pad on your right side and try to write down one word. What is going to be the common characteristics of this generation of students on your campus? One word, and one word only. Are we ready to show to the camera? Okay, show what you've got. Wow. Diversity, future leaders, motivated they are, ambitious.
I like the word.
Yeah, big laughter over there. I'll let you to explain one by one. Let's begin with the ambitious.
Well, I think that our students today are really driven to succeed. In part, that's because they feel a great deal of competition and there's a certain amount of anxiety, I'll be honest, but it's also because they have a deep desire to see the world made better, and I'm really inspired by that as a university leader.
Vice-Chancellor Richardson, do you agree with your colleague? You have a different word. Show it to us.
I have a different word, but essentially it's saying very much the same. Cambridge and Oxford recruit very similar types of students, and I think our
That's a polite way of putting it.
and I think our students have to be motivated because it's so difficult to get into these universities. And when they're here, they're motivated to achieve, and as Stephen said, to make the world a better place. They're surrounded by other students who are equally motivated, and that drives them even further. And so it's a wonderful challenge and privilege to be leading a university filled with such motivated students.
Absolutely. They are future leaders, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They are. What we're trying to do is both provide an education that is flexible, that allows one to learn throughout one's life. But that tradition of the university, combined with just how motivated and ambitious this generation of students means that I think we're going to see a lot of leaders come out of our universities.
I see a lot of common characteristics among the three words that you three wrote. But I wonder whether the quality of students has to be more than that if we're thinking about future leaders. As our world is changing so much, you heard a lot of anger, you heard a lot of talk about disparity. Will students with these qualities be able to take care of those issues? Let's go with the ambitious one. Vice-Chancellor too.
I think you're absolutely right in identifying some of the real challenges that our students feel. It's really interesting. I think there are differences in this generation from when I was at university. I think our students feel more pressure to try to address what are increasingly obvious disparities in society that you've adverted to. So I think that our students have the raw talent. Certainly I know at Cambridge, Oxford, Yale, Peking, they do have the raw talent. I think they are trying to figure out how, though, they can take what it is that they're learning at university and transforming it into an ability to actually make not just the world better for themselves, but actually make the world better for a wider variety of people. And if I may pull out the word that President Lin used, diversity is essential in all of that. I think all of our universities have one common phenomenon, which is they are increasingly diverse intellectually and from where students are coming, and that's important.
People will say, you guys are producing the elites. You're producing the top of the cream, and they're probably disconnected with the rest of the world. Vice-Chancellor Richardson?
Oh, I don't think so at all. I think you may be right that we are attracting elite students, but that doesn't mean they're disconnected. In fact, our students come from every walk of life. Education is the most powerful driver of social mobility that we have. So many of our students come from backgrounds very different from the worlds that they will occupy in adult life.
Give me an example.
I grew up in rural Ireland, one of 7 children. And some of my brothers today work on assembly lines, and I got to the position I'm in because education, because I got scholarships to work my way and got scholarships through university. And people are doing this every day. We all, in each of our institutions, have many students with extraordinary stories to tell. Immigrants coming into our countries, people from broken families and so on, but they're smart, they're driven, they're ambitious, they're future leaders, they're motivated, and they come to university, they work extraordinarily hard, and they get degrees, and they use them.
I see. But President Sullivan, if we don't see it elsewhere, we do see it in the United States. The anger, for example, reflected in the presidential election and many of the political debates that you have right here. So what about those students? Would they be able to face up to these challenges and very different views once they got out there into the real world?
I think young people in every generation, the 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, are often motivated by an idealistic sense of what the world can be. Sometimes that looks like anger, sometimes that looks more optimistic. You know, it can take different forms. But in that sense, I'm not sure that today's college students are that much different from yesterday's college students. I think the other thing that's important, our students come from far more diverse backgrounds than ever before at all of these universities. And then they're brought together, and they influence each other, and they are all trying to make their way. You know, the future world of work, whatever form it takes, is collaborative. People are going to have to work together. They're not going to be able to do that working alone. And learning in university how to collaborate with others, how to work effectively with others, that's part of our challenge in teaching and their challenge in learning.
Can that be achieved within the campus? That, of course, is a big question mark over there. But Professor Lian, all of your colleagues have already mentioned your keyword. Certainly, for Peking University, though, in a Chinese university, diversity is still a rare word, shall I say, because usually it is all Chinese students, and usually they are all moving up the ladder through college entrance exam. So what exactly is the diversity you're talking about here?
You're right. The pursue the sort of national entrance examination is really make people, I mean, alike. So that is also the reason we'd like to promote, to see the diversity of the student. Actually, for example, when Tian Wei was the president, and one of his idea is that graduate from Peking University should not go into any sort of government officials. You have to stay as a scholars or do some, the service.
So it's not encouraged to be a bureaucrat after graduating from university, but rather to do some grassroots job so that they learn through that process.
That's right. That's right.
Interesting. But, you know, China is changing so fast. So whether university will be able to provide the tool sets for your students is also a big question mark.
The education program we have is used to be very specialized, but now we are trying to diversify our education program. Take, for example, we have a more and more interdisciplinary program. We have even some programs only have one student.
Really?
Yeah.
Who is the lucky one? That's quite impressive.
Archaeology. So there's several years we only have one student.
What does it say about archaeology, I guess?
But if I may, I'd like to pick up on something you were just talking about. It seems to me that we are trying to educate students to take jobs we can't even imagine today. And so we have to think about, given that we don't know what jobs they'll have, what are the qualities that they're going to need? And it seems to me they're going to have to be very flexible and very adaptable. So we want to equip them with certain basic skills, so the ability to think critically, to write well, to reason, to act ethically, to engage with others in an intellectual fashion. These are the skills they're going to need irrespective of what job they have. So I think it's more important than ever that we look at the fundamentals, precisely because the pace of change is so fast these days.
The world is changing fast, taking all our lives with it. But we can change it too, by seeking answers to problems through discussions and debates. On World Insight, I ask direct questions to real people in the know, seek genuine answers, but respect diverse perspectives. Our live global debates tackle the most critical issues head-on. World Insight with Tian Wei go beyond the headlines. Can universities cope with the latest now? Are universities going to be relevant in the future? In a time of dramatic change, when there is a grand competition of powers and ideas, widespread disruption with technologies challenging the human role in future workplace, with social media transforming the way people interact, and existing systems and role models under scrutiny. Presidents from 4 of the world's best universities weigh in with straightforward answers, frank discussion. World Insight Special, the future of universities. Talking about the fundamentals, there are fundamental changes going on in the world. I know all of you are coming from very different perspectives. Besides being the administrator of a university, you are majoring in chemistry, you are in psychology, yours is more about the security issue, and yours, if I do remember right, that was about the law, rule of law. So very different perspective. You all know how the world has been dramatically changing. How exactly, to your eyes as an educator, and therefore, what sets of skills that your students have to learn now? Are you struggling with providing them with a platform, at least, they could have access to this information and to these skills? President Sullivan.
Sure. So I am a psychologist, and
we urgently need the help of the psychologists today.
The research in my laboratory was about emotions, and our laboratory did some of the fundamental work on the idea of emotional intelligence. And we describe emotional intelligence as a set of skills that individuals can learn, and if they learn them well, they provide them with an additional source of information on which they can make decisions, draw conclusions, motivate creative thinking, solve problems, and the like. When I was a student in school, we didn't talk about these things. It's not really part of the vocabulary, but now it is.
In fact, educational system in Asia is well known for so-called memorizing. And you follow the order and instruction of your teachers. But obviously, tomorrow's world, these skills will be easily replaced by robots or artificial intelligence. The black box will do everything. So what about that dramatic change the Chinese educational system, universities included, you have to do right now?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, actually, we have a lot of communications, and we start from the specialized education move to more general. We provide more general courses. We also encourage the student doing more practical activities. Actually, in Peking University, in chemistry, the student now, if you want to graduate from the chemistry major, you only need 5 courses in chemistry. So the rest you can take the others. And but you have to work practical with professors. I know there's quite a number of students they involved in this research start from even freshmen, so they are very active. So you have to identify the issues, problems, then you could solve those problems. You have the ability to do that. So that is, I think, the advantage of the research university. I think
problem-solving capabilities. That, according to President Lin, is some of the most important. Vice-Chancellor Tup, is that what you're thinking?
I'm thinking a very connected idea. I think today, education is much less about just accumulating facts, accumulating knowledge than it has ever been, because facts and knowledge are so widely accessible. So it's critical capacity, being able to analyze and deeply critique the information that is being presented to you.
Including the information coming from the vice-chancellor of the university. How your students are critiquing your information.
Absolutely. They have to be able to do that, and they have to be encouraged to do that. I would point to another area where I think there's a growing need, and that's what I would call intercultural fluency. More and more graduates of our universities are going to be operating in milieu where they have to work with people in teams, and where those teams are going to be increasingly diverse, to pick up past words. And that really requires some sensitivity and, frankly, a little bit of knowledge about how other people think. So I would add critical capacity and intercultural fluency.
Have you ever participated in some of those events or activities that your students are involved in order to improve these kind of life skills?
Absolutely.
Give me some examples. This is the time to test whether the university president really knows what the students are doing.
Exactly. So in a past life, I will say that I have been very directly involved in trying to work with students, in my case law students, to develop critical capacities through traditions that are about argumentation and are about testing ideas. I'm deeply involved in moot court competitions, which I think are very relevant to this from a legal perspective. On the intercultural fluency part, one of the things that I've always been interested in as a university leader is figuring out how to help students actually find connections across their cultural differences. I'll give a very...
What is the trick?
I think the trick is to try to have people feel confident enough that they are not going to be challenged about who they are. They're going to be challenged about the quality of their ideas and their argumentation. So there's a deep respect for where they are coming from, and yet a challenge at what their assumptions are because of where they're coming from.
Was it easy to learn?
It's hard. It's really hard, I think. And I think increasingly it's going to be important. It's very much in your heart as well as in your head.
That's what President Sullivan's job should be, is coming from here.
That's right. What Vice Chancellor Toop is referring to, I think, is the ability to empathize, right? To understand why someone else is making the argument that they make, why they make the assumptions they make, how you can learn to walk in someone else's shoes, trying to understand their perspective. And the increased diversity of our campuses actually is one way that students receive that education, right? They learn it from each other. They discover that their roommates are very different from themselves.
Though I would say it doesn't always happen naturally. One of the interesting phenomena is it is possible on campuses for people to cohere to their own groups. So you actually have to be quite tactical about how to encourage interaction.
How are you doing it tactically?
A concrete example would be making sure that you're mixing people in dormitories, making sure that if they have, for example, ethnically based cohorts, that those cohorts are encouraged and or forced to have interactions with other cohorts. I think you have to think about that really carefully.
Well, I'm trying to recall my university days right now. Vice-Chancellor Richardson, I have to ask you about that. Security issue, that's your research area. But the world has been changing so much, including with the security issues. And many of the concepts, mechanisms, the way of looking at geopolitics, the way of looking at the bigger security of the world has also been changing, evolving. You have many students come up to you and say, I'm sorry, professor, what you have taught us, out of date. See what is going on the first page?
No, they're much too polite to say that.
You know how they say it to you.
But actually, it's also not true, precisely because of the points Peter was making. The title of one of my books was Understanding the Enemy, Containing the Threat. And the reason I got interested in understanding terrorism was because I was baffled by how people who in some parts of their lives could be parents, upstanding parents, teachers, upstanding members of society, and then could join a group which would commit atrocities that violate every known ethical, moral, religious code in pursuit of a goal that the odds are they're not going to achieve. How do we understand that? So instead of depicting them as one-dimensional bad guys and psychopaths, I thought we would have to understand them. So one of the things I used to do with my students way back in the 1990s, I would require them to become an expert in a terrorist group. They would have to read all their literature. They'd get into trouble today probably if they did that, and so on. Then they would present their terrorist group to the class. And it almost never failed that the people who took this class, by and large, were people who wanted to join the military, wanted to be head of the CIA or the State Department, so no sympathy at all for terrorist groups. They would start by saying, well, all those other groups are terrorist groups, but mine isn't. You know, if you understood what they have suffered or the experience they've had or their history, you wouldn't see them as terrorists. And that, I think, is critical. It's about trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, even somebody who commits atrocities. I think most governments have responded to terrorism by trying to smash it, rather than trying to figure out what's behind it, where does it come from, why are people supporting these groups.
Exactly. President Sullivan, since the election, I know on university campuses in the United States, enormous amounts of debate about what exactly who we are and why we're here, where are we going. These are all psychological questions, I guess, in a way. But to you, how would you make sure that your university would facilitate the students with at least ways to explore answers?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and universities are in some ways struggling with trying to make sure that students with very different opinions from each other all have the opportunity to give voice to those opinions, listen to each other's opinions, look for common ground, debate issues, etc. We notice, you know, what you're getting at in some ways is a conversation about free expression that is happening on many campuses. And we're very fortunate on our campus. We do have speakers from all points of view coming and visiting. Our students do listen. When they protest, they do it in a way that doesn't interfere with the ability of another student, of a classmate, to hear the speaker, if that's what that classmate wants to do. So all of that works pretty well.
Yeah.
But there still is a challenge. And that challenge is, I think, in a different generation, if we disagreed with each other, we would just have it out. We would argue it, we would debate it, we would sit across the dining room table and over a meal argue with each other. But one of the things I've noticed about the current generation is that they have a little bit of an anxiety about doing that. They worry about offending each other. They worry about being perceived as a bully if they argue too aggressively. If they believe that their ideas are unpopular, they might be motivated not to share them as easily, particularly if they're at all introverted and it's not a natural thing for them to do. And so universities, I think, have an obligation to create situations where students can learn how to express themselves clearly and openly and without fear.
Was it difficult?
I think we're very lucky. Our residential college system for our undergraduates, which was modeled on Oxford and Cambridge, is an environment in which students live for usually all 4 of their years with the same students, and they become quite close to them. And that people with very different points of view might find common ground, might find something that they can work with, that they can agree upon.
I would like to put the same question to Professor Lin, President Lin as well. You mentioned several times in our earlier conversation President Tsai Ying-pei, 100 years ago. He is well known for bringing an intellectually diverse university. Left, right, conservative, liberal, even though China don't label people like that in this way, but you know, just put it into plain English. I know you have also been, if I could say it, working very hard to make sure under the current circumstances that would also happen.
I think each countries they have their own situation, and we are. I mean, as a university, we have to operate in this certain circumstances.
Right.
Yeah.
I see. But you know, President Lin, in China, there are so many different kinds of youth, because this is a dramatically changing country, as you could imagine. You know, there are those that are ambitious, motivated, want to be the future leader. But there are also those, if you put it into Chinese, 佛系青年, those otaku young people. They want to be in their little world. They want to have a quiet lifestyle, even though they're as brilliant as the students in Peking University. So you see very different diversity. How are you working with them? It's very difficult to frame them into one thing.
That's right. But I think we need to encourage them to involved to more social activities, to involve more in interactions, talk to more to the other people, yes, students and faculty. So that, I mean, we need to although they have different characteristics, we need to encourage them to I mean, to involved more, okay, to the society.
All of you have said beautiful things about how you're trying to change. But I have to say, it's not easy. You know better than I do. So where does the guts come from? Where does the courage come from? You know, there's one thing that people know how the world should be like. They know about education. Okay. So how are you facing a reality like this?
I just have a fundamental belief that universities are one of the most important social institutions in any country. Is just tremendously inspiring. And as I get to go around and see my colleagues working on every possible issue under the sun and see them trying desperately to discover things, to understand the world better, I'm absolutely convinced that we have to keep these institutions strong.
What is the latest thing that inspired you?
The latest thing that inspired me was a conversation I had with some stem cell scientists, wow, who were bringing together physics and biology. And without giving away too much, because they haven't published yet, okay, the idea that actually stem cells operate in changing not only through biological processes, but through mechanical processes. To me, this was a total revelation, and that physicists were helping biologists understand the evolution of stem cells. It's not an area I know at all, but as a university president, I heard about this, and I immediately thought, this is potentially transformational. If this is right, it has huge implications for how we understand change in the human and indeed the whole biome. And so these kinds of things drive you to think this has to be not only protected, but we have to ensure that these people get to work hard and to discover.
I got it. In the lights of your eyes and in the clench of your fists.
It's really exciting.
It is extremely exciting. Think about all the technologies and the debate between technologies and ethics as well. Absolutely. As we are debating.
We just had another debate about how AI is obviously transforming our understanding of what the world is going to look like and the deep ethical implications.
Absolutely.
Bringing together people in industry, bringing together researchers, students who have very strong feelings about these issues and want to learn more.
What about for you, Professor Lin? I go with both sides first this time. Okay. Where does the gut come from? I mean, as a reformer, you're well known for being a reformer. You were in some of the key universities in China. You left a track record of being a reformer.
You know, now the technology is advanced so quickly.
Yes.
And,
including in chemistry.
Of course, yes. So I mean, there's not a lot of new technologies, and also there's, I mean, even some technologies like AI and data sciences. The industry are doing a very good job, and sometimes we need to cooperate very closely to the companies, to the industry. So a few days we just talk about the how
but you know,
and the research.
that is not that easy to do, even though you brush it off and say, oh, there's the thing that we need to do. But it's not that easy, because if you look at the 3 other universities, they have learned throughout a long history of development how to build an ecosystem in which schools can work with business institutions and also with the general society. But for Chinese universities, I have to say, throughout history, we are still a campus that is quite enclosed, rather than incorporating with different factors of society. We're picking it up right now. But this is a process. And yet, your students, they want the best. They want to learn as fast as possible how to build that ecosystem almost in a way overnight, I would say.
It's hard, but we
Not
have
tonight.
to move.
Not tonight.
Not
Don't worry.
tonight. But we did a lot. For example, we opened up a new space for student innovative activities. Entrepreneurs. Take, for example, there's AWFL. So that is a group of students, actually. They found that there's a lot of bicycles on campus. They're not used. So they are repair those bicycles and sell with the student. Now they're becoming the...
They become very well-known entrepreneurs. Yes,
right, yeah.
I'm doing very well. What about the guts? Where does that come from?
Where does it come from?
Yes.
I think there's a very...
Is it easier for a psychologist?
I don't think it's any easier for a psychologist, but I think one of the ways to act in a courageous manner, I think, is to stop and ask the question, what is the right thing to do? What is right in this situation? And that sounds a little simplistic, maybe, but often there is a right way, a moral way, an ethical way to address a question. I'll give you examples. Some changes that we've made at Yale over the years. So we give far more financial support to students than ever before. For students at the median income level in the U.S. or lower who are admitted to Yale, their families pay zero. They pay nothing for them to come. And we extended that policy to international students as well. So they receive financial support using the same model as domestic students. And we made that decision, yes, for pragmatic reasons. We want the very best students, no matter where they're from, to come to Yale. That's clear. But it was also the right thing to do. We should be able to financially support everyone. And the very first speech I gave when I became president, first welcoming speech, was in 2013. And it was called Yale and the American Dream. And I didn't mean that to be parochial. That is, it's a dream that really applies to people all over the world, which is that if given an opportunity, like coming to a place like Yale, or Oxford, or Cambridge, or Beda, and if you work hard, you will be able to do something in life that perhaps raises you above the manner in which you grew up. We have a role as educators and as leaders of great educational institutions. We have a role and an obligation to help make it happen.
Exactly.
I think that's right.
What about the gut? Where does it come from?
Like Stephen, I'm inspired by the quality of the academic work that takes place around me, but also, as President Lin said, by the students. I mean, I've often said that universities are the last bastion of the optimist, standing at a...
Repeat it, please. I love it.
Universities are the last bastion of the optimist. I mean, there's a lot of quite dispiriting things happening in the world around us, and yet you walk into a graduation ceremony and you're surrounded by smart, ambitious kids.
Motivated future leaders who are diversified.
And they're proud parents, and you just think you have to have confidence in the future when you see these kids. So they're the ones who give you the energy to carry on. And you know, to make the difficult decisions that we all have to make.
It sounds easy, but you already, when you're talking about it, I have a goosebump in on my arms already, feeling about that moment. Before we go, I do have a final question to ask all the presidents of university to write down your answer, which is, what's going to be the future of universities? If I could, one word, once again. Just one word. Opening. It has to be opening. One, and network.
I think we'll be networked to each other. None of us can do everything.
Yes,
And so we will be
together.
working together more and more in the future.
Bright. That's an optimist, as you already said. And inclusive. There we go. It seems that all of you are writing in the same logic. It has to be opened, and everybody open to one another. It's going to be networked with the society, among many groups within the university, certainly inclusive as well. And that is going to guarantee
a bright future.
A bright future of university. There we go. Thank you so much for being with us. Really, thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.